Hello chess friends, this is International Master Valeri Lilov for the Remote Chess Academy, and today I'm going to be talking about a really interesting topic that I believe interests many chess players, and that's how prophylaxis works in the hands of a great master, like for example Anatoly Karpov. You see, people often have a question, like for example, what's prophylaxis and how to make it, and essentially just how do we do it successfully? Because in reality, it is not an easy thing. Now, I'm going to try and give you some explanation of what it is and essentially how you can make it by seeing how one of the greatest chess players in the world, Anatoly Karpov, did it in 2001. The game we're going to see was played between Anatoly Karpov versus Pablo Riccardi in the Ninedorf Memorial in 2001. So Karpov had the white pieces, and basically the game started with d4, knight f6, c4, e6, and knight c3. Now this is often the beginning of the Nimzo Indian. So black has a choice. If he chooses to play bishop b4, we have the Nimzo Indian. And yet he plays the move of d5, which is the actual Queen's Gambit. The Queen's Gambit declined is also a very popular system. The main idea for black is to occupy the squares of d5 and, of course, have the control of e4, which will guarantee him a rather, or you can say, expected convenient development. On the other hand, white would, of course, get certain pressure against the pawn on the d5, or at least try to put some pressure against it, and that's like the main plan. After edicts to the d, Karpov played rook bishop to g5, which is the main theoretical move, e3, c6, the light square bishop gets out, and essentially he plays knight f3, which is a very essential position, so black played now knight f8. And now, since I want to make this lecture as instructive as possible, the first thing that I'd like to ask you is what do you think is the best plan for white to go from here? See, answering certain questions like that is important because that will give you some insight on how you think and how you should be thinking. Essentially, this is a very important position. White's got a pin on the knight at f6, and ultimately he needs to find a way eventually to create threats, or if he cannot create a much of a bigger threat, at least find out a way to complete his development. Now, you can pause the video and take a little bit to think about what do you think white should do right now. What's like the best way to play it? Now, thinking about that, I guess most players would actually say, all right, I'm going to castle. Now, the most important in the opening is that we hide our king, we get the king into a safe position, we can do more after, right? Well, it kind of is like right, but the truth is that by playing like that, we are not going to get anything too special. See, when our opponent has made mistakes with his development, essentially what you need to know is that you got to play quick so that you can take advantage of it. Now, what is the black mistake in his development? Has he made any mistakes? Yes and no. He has spent 2 moves with a single piece in the opening, therefore leaving his king in the middle for quite a bit. And then the other thing that's not going so well is that he's actually holding a lot of his own forces on the back side, which means that he's behind in development with 2 moves. His knight on f8 could really not considered be like a developed piece, and for this reason, actually, we could say that white is up in development. Okay, so this is a great thing to consider. So what is like the best way for white to play it? Shall he go on for like a strong attacking move in this position, or are we supposed to go on with like a break? What's like the best order to follow it up? I think we don't need to break because we don't have enough pieces and we don't have enough firepower to do that. But what we can do, and what white chose to do in this position, was knight e5, and it was a really good move. What was the point of knight e5? The simple point about that move was that white wanted to prepare for f4, and with all these 3 pawns and a strong knight on e5, he is going to hold a serious tension against black's pieces. And yes, this is strong. The moment white's knight came out to e5, as you can see, black is having a problem. He can't exchange it because an exchange will actually leave white with the possibility of recapturing and basically attacking against the f6. And so when black plays knight g6, white continues with f4. That is simply fantastic. It's a great pawn that supports the e5, an excellent piece in development out there, and yeah, this is something good. The moment white did pawn at knight e5 with an idea of pawn to f4, we can realize that things are going pretty well for him. See, so keep in mind the following. Whenever you notice that your opponent isn't playing by the rules, you need to do something. It's not just about playing like any useful move. You need to do something more specific. And then actually after the move of pawn to f4, queen to b6, and queen c2, white has already gotten something out of the bad or vulnerable development that black had. Well, the knight on e5 is surely a great piece, and so after that move, black castled, and then white even chose to make a bishop takes to f6 kind of move. This creates double pawns and actual weaknesses within black's position. After that move, black had to play g takes f, and then white's knight comes back to f3. Is a double pawn like that really enough so that white can get a specific, certain advantage? Well, the truth is that sometimes it isn't. But what a certain pawn weakness or an important pawn weakness like that will serve us with is the idea to constantly pressure in it long term. And if we can get the pressure against such kind of pawn long term, then we realize that he's going to have much to worry about. Like we're not gonna win that pawn. Often you don't get to win such pawns, but you get to simply tie your opponents down to the defense, which is ultimately what you want. And essentially after knight f3, rook to e8, white simply played king f2. Now I wouldn't really like to say that king f2 looked good, but let's face it, what could black do? Where is his attacks? e3 seems fairly well protected at this particular moment. Most of the black pieces are quite behind in their ways, so I guess king f2 is quite okay. Of course, white's going to follow it up with an artificial castling, and yes, we haven't started the actual prophylaxis yet, so this is just the build-up. Rook c8. Now I guess white's supposed to start a plan. I mean, the rooks are connected already. Most of his pieces are up in place, and even the pawns in d4, e3, and f4 also look good. So the question really is, okay, what is white going to do, or what should he do in this moment? Now, take a little bit of a moment and think about what is white's best opportunity to follow up in this position. It's a really good question, and we'd like to find out exactly what's the best way for white to play right here, right now. Now, as you think about that, I'm going to suggest to you, most importantly, to look not for a move that is going to be anyhow of an attack. See, an attacking move is not going to work out so well. What we want to do is a prophylactic move. Yes! See, prophylactic moves are especially important when you've already achieved an advantage. People often believe that they should happen all the time, and it's kind of right. But they are especially important if you believe or if you think that you got an advantage, like you've created the big weakness against your opponent or something like that. Right now, black's got the weaknesses. He has got them. f7 and f6, they're all there. They're weak. So we are supposed to find a way to exploit them. And then what white did next move was beautiful. His next move was simply g3. And what was the reason for him to do that kind of move? Actually, well, I guess the reason for white played that move was simply because this helps white to get the support of the f4, and ultimately by having that fantastic pawn chain that he's making, essentially we could expect that this will give us some extra tension against the king side. But above all, we are going to stay away from any complications or anything special that black is going to intend in this position. This is a perfect move and a very valuable idea, just a small thing to keep in mind. And of course, after continuing with this move of g3, then essentially after the g3, black played king to the g7 in this case. And of course, after continuing with the move king g7, white played rook c1, little by little. The key is just like, let's get to concentrate on developing. And then, of course, after queen to the d8, white made another very important move. Prophylaxis you make by making sure that you support, like certain pieces so that the opponent doesn't get any easy attacks. And that's a very important thing. But sometimes you can actually do it in another way. The other way for you to do that is when you actually exchange speeds. I've also always said that to many of my students. When you want to make sure that your opponent doesn't have any unexpected or not that great looking tactics, find out who are the most advanced or powerful piece that he's got and just exchange them. Right now, the biggest piece that black will rely on is going to be this bishop. It's like there's nothing else he could rely on. That bishop is everything. If we could find a way to eventually get rid of it, that is going to be perfect. And white did find a way to do that. Here's bishop f5, what he did. Beautiful move, and definitely one that's working out quite well. If black exchanges right now, we get to realize that he's going to have his most valuable, his most advanced piece really forced to go away. And as a result of that, naturally, this is quite helpful to white. Very good idea and an excellent start. When that move happened, which is perfect, black played bishop takes f3, and white played king takes f. Why did he give away the bishop for the knight? I don't know exactly. I think that he probably believed that the position is going to remain closed, and probably the bishop will turn a little more important in that way. But, I mean, the knight will be more important. So that's why he wanted to exchange it for a knight. And then after rook to c7, maybe rook to e7, he will get some initiative. Of course, that is not true. And we can see why right now. After rook to e7, white played rook to the d1. He's got a very solid defense around. The e3 is being well covered. There is hardly to believe. I don't believe that there's any way in how black can deliver any serious attacks or threats out there. So this looks simply perfect. With the bishop on f5, every single problem seems to go away. Well, that was a great start. After that move, black played bishop to c7, and then white continues with the gradual improvement. It looks like white's ready to prepare play for e4. He needs to do something, but Karpov doesn't. Because what's really the speed with which we need to advance? And many people have often come to me and asked me, Valerie, how do you know? How do you know when to go fast and when to go slow? How do you decide on that? And I always tell them, you see, the speed doesn't depend on when you want to advance or when you don't. It depends on your opponent. And most importantly, it depends on what he can do. If your opponent cannot do anything dangerous or anything terrible, then I think that you're in position to reinforce, prepare, and do anything that you want that you believe will help you get a decent position. That's exactly what white was looking for in this moment. He knew that black can't do anything. So given that he cannot achieve anything dangerous against us, why not to reinforce and play some more moves of the kind like rook to e2, where that gets everything in place. We have the support already on the e3, and then even moves like king f2, because the king was long enough on the f3. I mean, obviously black didn't have a chance to attack in it so far, but we shouldn't just play with that. After all, the king is quite a bit of a target out there. So white moved it, a6, and right now the best move is bishop to g4. Little by little, one step at a time. This is a lovely way to play it, because first of all, it's easy. You're not hurrying with anything. You're not really calculating a whole lot of variations or things. And then the most interesting part of that is that when you go that way, what happens is that you're taking the time to think and really discover if there is anything at all that possibly your opponent is going to do or make as, like in response. Right now, black has nothing. And so white is taking the time. The queen's going to f5. And black's restriction is obviously mate, so nothing to worry about in that part. So queen f5, then bishop a7, and king f3 again. Now that may look a little bit strange because we just moved the king away from the f3, so it is not that exposed. Why does white move it back? Well, I guess that was to provoke a mistake. How exactly does king f3 provoke a mistake? I know you're probably going to wonder that. See, when you are in a good or dominating position, it's going to be a great deal if you don't, remember that, if you do not rush things up. Why is that? Because when you don't rush things up, what's going to happen is that your opponent will try necessarily, and I mean it absolutely necessarily, to find something that could give him a good hope. And when you don't give him the opportunity or the chance to do that, he's going to force things, which almost always affects his position quite negatively. That is one of the ideas that you can keep in mind as most important. What you got to remember is that no matter what's going on, you want to hold your opponent into the bad position for as long as you possibly can. Because when you do this, when you can do that, when you can achieve this, that is going to help you tremendously with the different activity you have. So Karpov did king f3. Doesn't that look to you like a provocation? He's like, white is literally telling you, like, I can go back and forth, I can do whatever I want, and you just can't do anything to stop me. Now, you see, the game of chess is supposed to be fun. And when you make your opponent feel like he is the worst player out there, then you take out the fun for him. That almost always, 9% of the times, results in a huge mistake made by him, and that is exactly what you want. You want him to make mistakes. You want him to force him to do the mistakes. And black played b5. Not that there was something much better. I mean, obviously white was intending to maneuver around queen h5 and bishop f5, and with those weaknesses, see, the difference between the white weakness on e3 is that black cannot really do anything special against it. White is naturally protecting him. But the difference between those and the black king weaknesses around is that white has plenty of ways to go against those, put extra pressure, and really keep the tension around. Now this is something good. After that move happened, then obviously black was in a fairly difficult position, so you played b5, and white simply came back with the queen. Yeah. Is it waiting? Yeah, it kind of is. It's letting the opponent to weaken his position, letting him make... That's what you want. You want him to make the bad moves, because the more you keep it like that, the harder it's going to be for him to find a way out. And then ultimately, after the move queen to d3, black kept going with a. He necessarily wanted to make some sort of quick counterplay. If he doesn't do this, he's just going to stay with nothing. No chance, no counterplay at all, and no possibilities of any kind. He needed to do this. Of a5, white plays with king to f2 in this position. And then after that, black plays b4. 8x to the b, 8x to the b, and knight a4. Now white's dominating the position. He's got a good pressure around, and, well, it's just a matter of time before it turns into something really significant. After knight a4, rook e4, bishop f3, and rook 4 to e7, we play rook c1. As you could realize from this game so far, the concept of prophylaxis is really to fight against whatever your opponent is trying to do, while at the same time you keep improving your position. Is it easy to make that? Of course not. If it was easy, everybody would be doing it. But you can start really now. In the next game you play, think about it. What is the intention or the threats of my opponent's last move? Even if you see no direct threat, still, if his intention is strong and he's got something important he wants to do, and fight against it. Fight against it, while at the same time you think about how you can improve your position and you can make it work. It was very beautifully the way how white did it, and what was most interesting about this is that after the rook c1, queen d7, such kind of strategy not only avoids any risks, but also it frustrates the opponent. Now, after the move of knight c5, black was already quite frustrated. It's like he did so much in order to hold that pressure and do some things around e3. And now he's like stuck. He's in the middle of nowhere. No chance to attack. It's that knight who is attacking very much. And naturally speaking, we could expect that this is pretty horrible. Black played queen h3, hoping that he can get around and maybe apply a certain pressure against the h2, but who cares really? This type of move is met by bishop g2, queen h5, and h3. Over here, white could have done a move of knight a6. Knight a6 would seem very powerful because it attacks two pieces at the same time, but Karpov didn't do it. Why? Because he knew that there was something else that needs to be done. The other thing that he wanted to do was to simply defend anything that could be attacked now or later by black. And the h-pawn simply looked like something that's hanging out there. Even though black couldn't take it because of rook to h1, there was always the opportunity for him to do so. So, we'd rather prefer if this is not possible. Here, knight b3, rook to e6 was met by f5, and then at the bishop f3, we realized that white will still take the pawn. This pawn isn't going anywhere, but we want to do it from a position of power. We want to do it on our terms, when we want it, when we feel secure about everything. Oh yeah, it was beautiful. Black played bishop to b8, and then white continued with h4. Rook c8 was met by queen e6, and ultimately with a few of these moves, we realize that black is left in a terrible backward position with a lot of his forces just standing and unable to defend against what's coming. After a couple of these moves, black obviously resigned, given that the inability to defend against those pieces. But what's really incredible about this game, and what made me such a strong impression, was on how Karpov was always going slowly. The only time when he wanted to go fast, when the opponent intended to really defend and consolidate. So when you see he's got something to do, you want to be faster so that you don't miss that perfect opportunity. However, when he doesn't have anything, you reinforce. You just make your position stronger. Knight e5 was the quick opportunity, after which white got a permanent control, the weaknesses, and from this point on, he simply kept on building and kind of making the opponent get so frustrated that he starts making mistakes on his own. Now, what if the opponent waits? Some will ask. What if I do all these prophylactic moves and he waits? Well, that's even better. Let him wait. Because when he actually starts waiting, the important thing is that he's going to do nothing to improve his position, and every little prophylactic move, every little strengthening move is going to help you get better and better. So at one point, of course, you'll be so much better that you will break through no matter what he has done. Yet, your advantage will definitely count, and yep, that will certainly give you or deliver the victory. It was a beautiful game, interesting concepts that Karpov applied, and it really makes you think that the slow prophylactic play is often much more effective than the quick and rushed tactical ideas that we try to apply at a very early stage against the opponent, and they usually don't work. So I hope that you enjoyed this game as much as I did, and you can take advantage of using some of these concepts in your next games. Thank you.